usually it's just us four, but today we decided to talk about toxic masculinity, and we thought it was only fair to have a male perspective on something that, you know, is so much to do with men. So we've invited three of our friends onto this episode, which will be Leon, Dre and Caleb, and we're really looking forward to having a conversation with them.
Should I just start with a quick, just a question like I do? So what is, because Twitter loves to throw the word toxic around, well, I think social media in general, what do you guys define as toxic masculinity, if I can say it? Yes, Naima.
I believe toxic masculinity is this idea of what a man should be. So a man has to be macho, a man shouldn't cry, a man has to be like the main provider, just like this really unrealistic, unhuman like idea of what men should be, and that, like, you know, boys shouldn't have emotions, boys, just everything to do with that thing of like hyper masculinity, of, you know, they should act a certain way, and I think it's toxic because also then that puts an expectation on how women should be also, and that women should be like, you know, like, say, not to bring the church into it, but like I feel like
how many seconds in are we?
Just about to.
These like themes of toxic masculinity, I do feel like they kind of do run through the church a little bit. Like I remember I was going to church and it would be like the man is the head and the man does XYZ and the woman is just like, you know, Curly's wife, just going along with it. And it's almost like, for me, my definition of what toxic masculinity means to me is that men are not allowed to have emotions, men can't be human beings, men can't open up, men have to be macho, men have to be the protectors, men have to be the providers, and that then means women are not independent and can't have their own voice and have to be submissive to the man. That's like my interpretation of it. Or when I see things and I'm like, this is toxic masculinity, that's what I feel like, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, because I think all the things that you've mentioned, what's so crazy is toxic masculinity was created by a patriarchal society. So men created it. And when people are cussing, they're like, oh, women expect XYZ from me. What people don't realize is all of this is actually internalized patriarchy. All of it is internalized misogyny. So people don't clock. It's not women aren't the problem. Men aren't the problem. It's a patriarchal system that men have created that is actually killing the mandem. Like suicide is the biggest killer of men in the UK till today.
Mm-hmm.
And men aren't the ones supposed to have emotions. Men aren't the ones that are supposed to cry. Like I asked my male friends, when was the last time you cried? And they're like, no, I don't cry. Like, that's okay. You're allowed to cry. You can see the pain. It's all right. Like, it's actually all right to be in pain. So I agree now. I think that's exactly it. I think it's what men have created and now it's killing them.
From my lived experience and like what I've learned, I feel like one thing that is interesting for me is some of these quote unquote norms that we now have the privilege of labeling. So now you can put your hand and say that is out of order, or that is really good, keep doing that. So from what I understand, toxic masculinity is that it's like a monolithic way of expression for men, and there's no alternatives. Like this archaic sort of method of being a man, whereby anything alternative is deemed weak, effeminate, you know, all these other unfortunate adjectives that is used to describe any other way of being a man, which is like you mentioned, Nima, which is like if you're not macho, if you're not a provider, if you're not like in your feelings, if you're not bootstraps, getting on with it, being a soldier. And I think I'm really glad you mentioned the church, because we see that it's various different cultural like sects where this thing is perpetrated. So it religiously is done. Then you have it in certain traditions from different like parts of the world. Then you also have it in the Western world where you get capitalism involved and all that kind of stuff. And I think like for me, toxic masculinity is basically saying that there's only one form of expression. I think that for me, that's where it stems from. There's only one way you can deal with a situation as a man. And I think that kind of thinking is where toxic masculinity is birthed from, because that's where there is a vilification of any form of male expression that is not doesn't fit this norm that has been created. So that's what I think of toxic masculinity. And the toxic comes from people fighting themselves, people fighting against their true selves. You know, when you consistently live a life, for example, I'll use the race issue, right? When you consistently are in a space where you fight against your inner self, you don't speak a certain way because it doesn't fit into the spectrum. You don't walk a certain way because it doesn't fit into the spectrum. You don't dress a certain way. After some time, that breeds some sort of animosity in you, and then you project that, and that's where it's toxic. So if, for example, you're having you're your partner and you're having like a very stressful week, and because you don't do the human thing of sitting them down, letting them understand that I'm having a bad time, this is what you can help me with, all that sort of expression, letting it out. If it's seen as something you can't do, you bottle that up, and then after a couple of weeks, you start to project. She or he becomes the problem when it was never them anyway. So that's what I realized that toxic masculinity is in real life, and how it evolves over time. So yeah, that's my take.
Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, I think that's the podcast. That's a wrap. We've covered everything.
What do you think, Caleb?
I'm sitting and listening for now.
No.
Fair enough.
I think I have an issue with the term in itself, toxic masculinity. It's like you said before, it's a broad brush, and the issue we come up with is, what is toxic masculinity, and then what is positive masculinity, and then what is the difference between masculinity and femininity, if we can say it like that as a word, because the two are different. And then, obviously it's a spectrum. People lie on different ends of the spectrum, but what started off as something, in my opinion, from what I've seen, what circulates on my feeds, because obviously it's all algorithmic anyway, but what I've seen is more started off, it's okay to talk, like you can cry, but it's now the message is more, you should be crying, you should be emotional. I think there's a big difference between toxic masculinity and emotional control.
Yeah. I think it's the option too, isn't it? I think it's if you should choose to express your emotions, that should be allowed without it kind of contravening.
Also, on that one, who should we be expressing it to? Are we saying that people should be expressing it publicly? Are we saying that they should be expressing it to any and everyone?
No, I think it's like women
express it publicly, but we can talk to our girls.
Yeah, I think the point is kind of to say, because in society it's accepted if a woman goes to cry to her friends, but if a man did the same thing, it's like it's a problem or it'd be deemed weird. So I think it's just allowing who you want to cry to. Like if you want to cry to your friend, your mom, whoever, it's like you shouldn't feel like you can't. I think that's the whole.
And it's not moist.
Yeah, exactly.
And expressing yourself. I know that men find it even hard to cry in a room by themselves, or even write a diary, or things like that. So it's not by force to express yourself to other people, but just have the opportunity to feel like you can do this without being judged or criticized, or a part of you taken away. Because
I understand. Sorry, finish.
Yeah,
my bad.
Go ahead.
No, finish, man. That was rude. Sorry.
I guess if you say you identify as a man, and then they say men don't do these stuff, I think it's hard for you to now do those stuff and still identify as a man. So we should take away that.
Who's been saying that though? Because I don't think people are saying that now. Maybe 15.
I think it's internalized though.
Ago.
I think it's very internalized. I think like with any systematic or systemic thing, it is internalized. Like nobody's actively saying it because it's now almost against the internet rules to say such things. You will be dragged. So people won't say it, but that doesn't mean that people, I'm talking the majority, because there will always be an exception, right? And I think, hi Dre, but the majority will still kind of feel like, oh, I can't do this. Nobody's saying it to them, but it's internalized. They'll be thinking, I can't, even if it's to your partner, they'll be thinking, I can't tell my girl this. I might seem moist or whatever, or like, I can't tell my boys this because we don't talk about that stuff. Because these rules, nobody told them this. Like, there was never a guidebook that was handed out when they were born, a man, right? But it's just that's what they think.
So it has to have come from somewhere.
I can. Yeah, I'm obviously a female, so I can't speak on my experience, but I can speak on my brothers. We all grew up together, and my brother was told, "Don't cry, you're a man," from when he was younger, when he's a boy. So I've heard it, I've seen it, and now he's stopped crying. I cry, and I'm older than him. I've never seen him cry past the age of 11 because he was told, "Don't cry."
Is it a good thing if you see him cry? Because this is the kind of turning point that we're at now. Like, is it a good thing?
No, it's not. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. But his rights were taken away from him. So if he was told you can cry, and then as an adult he chooses not to cry, that's his prerogative.
That's fine, yeah.
Because there are women who don't cry.
Yeah, I don't cry. I hate crying, like as a passion. Don't like it. But that doesn't. I've never felt like I can't cry.
And it's not because
it will then coincide. Yeah, exactly. I just don't like crying.
Yeah.
But I think for men.
One thing that Samia mentioned, which I think alludes to what I was trying to say, is that I think it's conditioning. I think there needs to be an appreciation for how much we're conditioned. For example, we've come to the point where, like Caleb was mentioning, we've come to the point where we're almost governing how people express themselves, even though you're prescribing it. So, for example, I always find it with a similar issue. It's a false equivalence, but I'm reaching here, so help me out. So, you know how, for example, some feminists will say, young Muslim women women that wear the hijab or the niqab or whatever, they're being quote unquote oppressed. And some of them say, no, actually, I believe in these values and I want to wear this. I think we have to be careful as well when we are prescribing ways for men to come out of this toxic masculinity and improve their mental health, not to now be governing how they express themselves. So, for example, we've all been conditioned in different ways, both by gender, race, and other things, right? And I feel like when we look at the fact that men have a different way of expressing themselves, and it might not be crying, or it might not be, sitting down and talking to somebody. Sometimes it's literally bucking a friend, having a beer, and just telling them that, the week was hard. It's not your typical crying, or it's not whatever, but in that moment, it's therapeutic. And we have to be open-minded about the different forms of expression of masculinity, that we don't also now narrow it down to you have to cry and put a shoulder around you and all that kind of stuff, because whether we like it or not, we've been conditioned. Even on the playground amongst your boys, there comes a time where you get a rough tackle whilst playing sport or whatever, and you just decide, I'm not going to wild out, and that's fine. Because, like you said, emotional control is definitely different, in my opinion, from just expressing your feelings. Like, we're human beings. There's an aspect of us that needs to be taken care of, which is our mental health. And people can prescribe things, but I think getting to the territory of saying this is what you should be doing, and if you're not doing that, you're, perpetrating toxic masculinity. Or
I just want to, I want to pick apart some of the points that you've mentioned, and I'm going to go in order. So, like, I get where you're coming from with the whole, like, feminist thing, with the whole, but that is white feminism. That is not feminism. I'm so sorry. That's not actually what feminism is about. From the moment that you say, oh, a woman wearing a niqab or a hijab is oppressed, feminism has never been about policing anything. Exactly. Feminism isn't about policing how men express themselves. And that's why people get it twisted, because you have pockets of this radical ideas where it's like, men should cry. I want my man to sit down with me and cry on my lap. That's not feminism. Yeah. Feminism is you should have a choice, right? And I absolutely agree. I think that's great. I think because boys have a language of their own, just like I think women have language of their own, right? I think we all do, in like our little pockets of like friendships, relationships, we have our own coded language. So if a man says to his guy friend or whatever, they're just talking, they're like, rah, today was rough, and they're like, bro, I feel you, calm, then move on. That's fine if that's how they express themselves. Feminism isn't about that at all. Feminism is about having the choice, whether it's how they dress, Like, it's never saying one is better than the other. It's never somebody who's covered or who's naked is better than the other. It's not somebody who's, you know, a man who cries is better than a man who doesn't cry. It's just access to choices. You should all have access to the same choices. And that's what feminism has always been about. Social, sexual, political, like economic. That's it. It's equity in that sense. Just having access to these choices. And I think I completely understand what you're saying. I don't want to have this narrative of, if you're not this, then you're toxic or you're toxically masculine or whatever. All my issue has always been, and I think this is where men are trash stems from, isn't from 1-2 dates where a man won't pay. That has never been it. It has been from a cycle of abuse and oppression that a patriarchal society has put on women. Like, I'm sure we've seen the stuff with Turkey, right, where 19 women were killed by their husband, and only in 2019 through domestic violence. Is it 420?
440.
440, sorry, yeah. That's more than one each day. That is a demonstration of toxic masculinity, because there is also toxic femininity. But the weird thing is, toxic femininity hurts itself. Toxic masculinity hurts others and themselves. So I think that's the problem here. And we're like, it's not just about crying or mental health. It's not just that. I think it's a lot bigger than that, because when a man's mental health is jeopardized, it affects the whole family, right? When a woman's mental health is jeopardized,
anybody in the family whose mental health is jeopardized affects the whole family. Like,
I get that's okay. That's not what I was going there. I'm just saying. Same with that. I absolutely agree. But like, I'm saying, if he now feels like he can't express himself at all because of, you know, depression is not a manly disease, and this is internalized, how will he then, like, you won't even go to therapy?
Do you think anyone thinks that? As a man, I've never come across the thought that, you know, if you're depressed, you know, that's like not masculine.
I think saying I have
come
depression,
across that. My dad has said that to me before.
Saying I have depression is not a done thing, and I think it intersects with also coming from a place of like culture and obviously race, but I do think that's still a thing.
Yeah,
I think it can be culture as well, because I feel like black men, or the black man's experience, is definitely different to a white man's experience when it comes to that. And like Leon's just said, obviously his dad told him that.
Just straight up, like,
African or Ghanaian thing, or wherever it might be, like the whole, you know, they don't really acknowledge it as a thing. I think only especially when they're like back home, but when it's like, when you've grown up here, at least they have more of an understanding of it. But even then, it's very like deep rooted, and they don't really know how to deal with mental health.
Yeah, I remember speaking to my dad and thinking, you must have had, like, obviously came into this country early 80s, XYZ, and was like, you know, tough times then. I did politics at uni. Then I come to realize that this brother came when it was like Thatcher was in power. Apologies even he lost Thatcher. So he must have had a rough time. And then I asked about the racism, XYZ. Then I delve into, how did that affect your mental health? It's like, you people, this generation, let's toughen up, depression. Like, he was like, he threw it out of the way. Like, I was trying to make the link, like, how has being a young man in those times affected his personality now and who he is? And he just rubbished the whole thing. He just said, nah, depression, just pray or something and just move on.
The prayer.
I do think
is depression getting worse? Is it getting worse, or is it just that we are realizing and accepting it more? Because you seem to see a lot more people saying, I'm depressed or whatever. And is that because we're a generation of snowflakes, or is that because it actually is getting worse? And if it is,
it's partly that as well. There is a lot of that in there, because a lot of people saying they're depressed are not clinically depressed. If you're clinically depressed, that's one thing. If you're sad, you're sad. If you've got issues in your life, you need to sort out those issues in your life. If you're in a situation that is constantly putting you in a certain way, that's not going to change no matter what drugs you take until you get out of that.
Yeah, I think feeling and disease, they're two completely different things. And I absolutely agree. I think that's why I don't even like the use of mental disorders as adjectives, because they shouldn't be. You're not feeling like, you don't feel depressed, you are depressed. You know what I mean? Like, you can't feel a disease. Nobody ever says, I feel cancer, I feel cancerous. You don't, because we've accepted it's an actual disease. You will never use it in those terms. Nobody will say, I feel disabled. Like, you just shouldn't, right? So I think I absolutely agree. I do feel like it's also increasing, isn't it? Like, I don't know statistically, but I feel like more people are being diagnosed with depression.
But again, is that because we're a generation of snowflakes, so we're easier to, I don't know, get depressed, be upset?
I think it's both, you
know.
I
think
it's both. I think it's on the rise, and also there is an aspect where, so I think there's a labeling issue, and then there's also the fact that it is rising because we make, decisions are made the comparisons as to the kind of life we live as young people now and the kind of life that young people back then lived. Like, the pressures are too much. Like,
the pressures are more now.
I think the pressures are more
social
now.
media?
Yeah, big part.
But then I think real life stuff, man. Like, if you look at what you have to accomplish at 21 for the person in this day and age, and what you have to accomplish by 21 then, and the pressures and the comparison, it's on steroids.
But that's just because you're constantly comparing yourself with other people who are portraying a
you're not given a choice.
Image.
You're not given a choice, bro.
Everyone's given a choice.
No, you're not given a choice as in the kind of world we live in, where, for example, right, the kind of world we live in, if you choose to say, okay, cool, I'm going to do an apprenticeship instead of go to uni, it's already a stigma, right? Something as simple as that, right? And then you go to career options, then it's like there's a hierarchy of career options. So any form of like what I want to do in my life now becomes like, are you doing better or are you doing less? So I think that can lead on.
See what you said there, yeah. What you said there, are you doing better or are you doing less? That already is comparing yourself to somebody rather than just doing your own walk. And I think that's a huge problem that we've got in our society. Everybody wants to compare themselves with the next person, and obviously that is what can stem to people being depressed, being upset, being envious, jealous, hate, all these kind of things that can stem from just watching people on social media rather than just focusing on your own path. Everyone's got a different journey. People are going to achieve things at different times. So I think if there was more of a push and more of an awareness on just being yourself, and everybody knows don't feed into social media because the amount of the times that we've seen the behind the scenes of these people that live in these lavish lives, but really they're just normal people who have just like got a good shot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the rest of us who are seeing that, we don't know that. So we think, oh, these guys are doing this at 21. These guys are doing this at 22, whatever. Why am I not there? Do you know what I mean? Why am I still in this situation? Sure. So yeah, I think say it like what you were saying there. I think you have to kind of change the script completely, and it has to be like, okay, cool, this is my journey. I know there are expectations of society for me to be at a certain level, but what do I want to do? What steps do I want to take to get to where I need to be?
That takes crazy will, though. It takes a lot of mental crazy will and some education, which doesn't come to everybody free, you know? Yeah.
I don't personally have social media, and I still feel like there's an issue with mental health in young people. For example, just our lives. If you think we're humans and we should be doing a certain amount of exercise a day, just because of the way that our lives are structured and set up, we don't do as much exercise. Not only exercise, but the food we eat. Once again, it's not the correct things that we're eating. And this is all recent. And then the last thing that I think is really affecting our mental health and stuff is information and access. Not just on social media, but just to everything. We have so much access to literally even material stuff. It's like an overload and our brain can't cope. So even in the last 20, 30 years, the amount of access to information and materials has increased. The amount of exercise we do is decreased, and the amount of unhealthy food we eat is increased. This is all contributing factors. Forget about social media, we'll put that to the back of us, but just our lifestyles that have changed. And I think these are contributing to these issues.
Yeah, and that's why I say you're not given a choice. I feel like that's the thing. Like, even if you're not on social media, there's so much you have to deal with, in my opinion, that I feel like the brain hasn't evolved that quickly between a couple of generations to consume this much information. Like, I for example, like the last week, pressure's been on at work or whatever, and I'm trying to rest. I'm genuinely like, you know what, I'm taking a break, but my brain is not stopping because every conversation I have is linked with some to-do list or some actionables, and it's like, I actually can't rest. Like, I've stopped what I'm doing, I'm off the screen, and I'm just laying down, and my brain is deciding that it's not going to stop, right? And I'm like, wow, this is crazy, because I'm going to start practicing these healthy habits. But the fact is that I'm just overly connected, and I can't do anything about it, because if I say I'm going to go on WhatsApp, then it means I can't do my work, I can't do certain things, or I don't want to check my emails. Like, if you try and disconnect yourself, you have to do it the whole way, or not at all. And I think it's one of the things that causes that gradual, mental health issues. But yeah.
I think what I'm worried about is that as a generation, because like going back to what Caleb said a while ago about, does anybody actually still think like the men, the stigma around mental health has decreased, etc. My fear with all of this, all the pressures, isn't that we're being more accepting. I think we're becoming more desensitized. So the reason why we don't see mental illness as like a massive thing is because we are subjected to so much terrible things each and every single day, and we become desensitized to it. The reason why, like there's like every single new day we have different issues to focus on. So I think as a generation that also adds to the pressure, because we're so desensitized, and the only thing we can really feel is how we're not doing enough. Because I've definitely felt that. I'm just like, wow, I'm 21, I've done nothing. And that's how I felt at 20, and that's how I'm going to feel at 22. Like,
interesting.
Which is, and I don't think it's a thing of comparing, because I'm not comparing myself to somebody else. I'm not thinking at 23, Mark Zuckerberg had created Facebook in 2 weeks. That's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking with what I'm trying to accomplish, the time is getting like slower and slower, right?
Where did the timeline come from?
It's from within. I think it's from within. And I think that I think is an almost a consequence of ambition with everyone. And as a generation, we're very ambitious. So I think it's less to do with comparison. I think that does play a very big part in it, though, Dre. I agree with you. But it's also more to do with ambition. Because there's a saying which I've accepted, and I don't know if that's good or bad.
Are we more ambitious because we're seeing that other people look like they're living a successful life?
Perhaps. Yeah. Or as a generation,
and because there's more option.
Yeah,
there's more
exactly.
Option. Because obviously social media wasn't a thing back then, and obviously things like YouTube, Google, Instagram, they've made people be able to live lives of financial freedom. So maybe rather than saying I have to go to uni and I have to get be in a job for 10 years and work my way up the ladder, which is what our parents would have had to do, we've now got this wealth of opportunity in front of us. So it's like, if we're not capitalizing on what we've got in front of us, then what are we doing? So I think ambition has come more with the generation because of the resources that we've got.
And also, like, sorry, Serena, you go.
I was going to ask you guys, do you think the pressure of society is worse for men in this day and age then? Or do you think it was worse back in the day?
I don't think so, man.
And why?
I agree.
I don't think so, man.
I think it's worse now.
Have it worse.
I think it's
in terms of pressures. And I'll say why. Because, a woman in society, okay, let's just take day-to-day stuff. A woman is valued as a woman, right? A man is not valued unless he's doing something, unless he's accomplished something, unless he's got a certain role. A man is not valued. A day-to-day man, because most of the men you talk about are top runners of companies who are doing bits, right? But let's talk about day-to-day man who's on benefits, just doing his thing. He is not valued as a man.
Sorry, what does
Where does this stem from? This stems from the patriarchal society. It's men who have told men that they're not valued.
No. You wouldn't listen to him, though.
Let him land.
Yeah, like I want to understand what you mean by a woman is valued as a woman and a man. Like, can you?
Like, a woman doesn't have to do anything. Like you see in society a lot. You see a woman who hasn't really got much going on. She will demand the most from a man. Say, I need a man who be 6 foot, secure, stable, financially, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. But a man who has not already got all of his stuff together, all of a sudden, like, it's like, what's going on, bro? Do you know what I mean?
I feel like women still have the pressure of like how they look.
Not
yes,
much.
they do.
The how they look, it's a different kind of pressure.
It's a different pressure, man. Come on.
Can I bring some
how you look, you
like,
could do that in a couple of hours.
Acceptable.
It's not that.
Can I bring,
people are going to Turkey to change their bodies. It's not just about.
Yeah. But that's because they're comparing. That's because they're comparing themselves to people.
A woman. That's the problem. The world hates women.
I think to answer your question, Serena, like, honestly speaking, right, like, if I'm to come out of my feelings and as a man or whatever, I think I'm always, like I said, as I grow up more and more and I get to know about, like, women's, like actual women's life. So not like we're in secondary school and uni, we're all struggling in the same boat. But like, I realized, I think women have it worse. You know why? Because back in the day, there was very, very set roles, you know, and albeit that, you know, there was some toxicity about it or whatever, but like women knew what they had to do, and a man knew what they had to do, right? And right now, we have all that generation now saying, you have to do what you used to do back then and more. Like, think about it. Like, I personally ain't like messing with no woman who is not like intellectually on the same level or whatever, or it's not the same sort of financial or whatever. So I have my own standards, and these are my standards. Then I place it on the fact that if I'm gonna be an old school man, now I want the house clean. I want you to raise my kids. I want you to look your best all the damn time, bro. I have a girlfriend in it, so I start to realize that how much nails cost, right? I don't ever do my nails, right? Bruv, I came to realize how much nails cost. I came to realize how much makeup costs. And I was like, if I break it down in terms of month by month, there's an aspect of their livelihood that costs so much money for the next, let's say, 20, 30, 40 years that I'm never going to have to pay for, right? I'm never going to have to pay for myself, right? Then I come to realize all the other standards and all the other sort of the trends and the fashion and all these kind of things to keep up. And I'm like, you know what? It's always a white tee and jeans for men and some nice trainers. Like those things, like unless you're on some buying your brand and you're like into your fashion, I'm saying that when I look at the different sects of our livelihood and I compare it to a woman, and as a grown man, and like I have girlfriends who, you know, you get to know about some of the way their lives go and like, you know, all these other stuff that they do. And like you said, still have ambition. Like you said, Shreya, you still have this ambition to become, you know, whoever you want to be. And you know that you have a skill set, you know you've been blessed with talent, and you want to develop it. Then you have to add all this aspect of like being, I don't know, a woman that caters to a man or caters to the family, all that kind of stuff. I start to realize that, you know what, like, it's actually not just impossible, but then it makes no sense. Like, I couldn't do it. Genuinely couldn't do it. I just think it's mad.
Bro, like, if you think about it, like, I might be wrong, but the way I'm taking it is that you're saying that we've had to adapt, but none of these girls lived back in the 80s. Do you know what I mean? So they're not really adapting. They're just living what they're living. Do you know what I mean? So it's
you're so annoying.
The condition, like, bro, but the condition largely is still there, bro. Like, there's still a
Of course it's there.
Like,
of course
you still be looked at you still be looked at sideways if you can't cook, bro.
Yeah.
From young, you're being told.
If you tell, like, no matter whether you're like a Instagram baddie or you're like a doctor or whatever, bro, you still have to have your youth and take care of them and cook. Like, I don't care how smart you are. That's the mentality, right?
So if we're not living from the 80s or whatever, why is one of the first questions that men always ask, can you cook?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
With these uni
because
boys,
do you know why? Do you know why? It's because a lot of people can't cook.
Bro.
No one's saying that we can't cook. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's very cheeky for a man to ask, can you cook if he can't cook himself?
That's silly.
I ask because I know that I can cook. So
but why do you ask?
Because like you're a grown person.
It's just
if
normal.
You can't cook, yeah, there's an issue there. That's like not being able to read or write. You can't feed yourself. So you're telling me you live by yourself, you're gonna eat pizza for the rest of your life. That's not okay. Do you know what I mean?
But then we don't find our value in that. The value of a woman is placed in that, which is unfair, right?
It's what?
Say? Like the value of a woman is placed in that, like more than a guy.
I disagree.
I think it's the value of a human. I think it's
all a woman. If a woman is found as attractive, she will get guys regardless.
Yeah, she will, because a lot of guys don't care. But like, remember, there's different levels of people in life.
Of
course.
Dre, do you ask your boys, can you cook when you first meet them?
He's not trying to date his boys. He's not trying to date his boys.
I'm not trying to raise a family with them. Do you know what I mean? So it's different. I don't really care. But all my boys can cook though, for the record. Yes.
No, but like, it's interesting though. It's interesting. I feel like, to answer your question, I find it that the pressures are on for me. Like, I definitely understand that, like, the pressures are crazy as a guy. But then,
you think you got more pressures than what your dad would have had?
Nah, man. My dad, like, honestly, the diasporan. So I'm originally Ghanaian African, right? So the diasporan like whole thing of we have parents that came here at a point in their life that was just a madness. Like the immigration stories are crazy, hilarious though. But like, like I look at it and go, I don't, because bro, like economically, they have succeeded in it. They brought us here. I've grown up, you know, I'm doing okay, followed the way I should go, all that kind of stuff. But I think the pressures are not, I won't compare them, but they're different, man. Like there's certain things that I'm having to deal with that my dad is probably thinking like crazy. Like my dad was able to just do a menial job, put some money in the bank and bought a house. Like I'm earning way more at the same, I'm earning way more at a far younger age than my dad. That is not a reality. I don't see myself owning my own house in like the next 5 years, and I'll be approaching 30 by then. You know what I mean? Like it's different, but like I have a lot more privilege in terms of education privilege, being able to navigate like different social networks, and basically also being able to express myself a little bit better. So my privilege is different from his, but then the pressures, I'll say,
it was more structured back then, and it's more difficult now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I feel like it's because the thing is, you have to realize that we were raised by these kind of men, right? So there's a conditioning where, just to go back to the toxic masculinity aspect, so the toxic masculinity has an aspect of it which is just basically borrowing from old ways of being a man, right? So I was raised by my dad, who has this very archaic, like, listen, you know, you get your bootstraps up, go to the field, get your money, come take care of your family, and you put up and shut up, right? So if you've been raised by that, but now you live in a world where you're being asked to now be all these other things, it's confusing, because in real time, you're having to evolve, like in real time. Like literally every day, you learn something new, then you start to question yourself and go, wait, is that, what's, like, do you know what I mean? And then you're with your set of boys, and then you realize that, wait, everybody is having their own little struggle, and nobody knows like what the right way is. So that is the kind of pressure that I feel like, as a man, I feel very much like there isn't a set way. But, you know, thankfully, I'm just lucky where, you know, the social networks that I am within, it's more uplifting, and, you know, there's a lot of co-elevation. But for a lot of young men, I feel like there's a lack of direction on what to do to feel like a man and to be like the person you want to be. Like, I feel like what you're saying earlier on, though, is really key, but it's not as easy, man. I feel like you must have had those discussions with somebody else, or some elder must have sat you down and imparted that knowledge. And I think we underestimate that.
Do you know what?
Just staying in your lane.
No one actually told me that. It was just kind of I used to just observe. I'm a very observant person, so I just like watch how people behave and act and stuff like that. And I can remember, like, when I was at uni, I remember people being upset over things on Instagram. I'm thinking, how are you that roped in? And then it made me kind of like analyze myself and be like, okay, am I falling into this trap or whatever? And I started to distance myself from social media. So like throughout my life, I'll have periods where I won't be on social media, I won't be that active as much. Like, so at the moment, I'm currently going through one of those. So I haven't been posting that much. I haven't really been commenting and all that kind of stuff, because it's hard not to, like you were saying, it's a lot harder than it sounds to not get roped in, because you just end up scrolling for hours and hours and hours, and all the stuff is just feeding into your mind. But I want to touch back on one of the things you were saying earlier. I think the struggles are equally as difficult for both generations, like our parents and ourselves, but they are wildly different. So like back then, obviously, that especially black men, they would have to go through the whole racism thing, trying to get a job, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously they had to be the sole provider, like, because that was just what was expected back then. Do you know what I mean? They've got to be the provider. Women, you know, like you said, you've got to know how to cook, clean, all of that, raise children, raise family, blah, blah, blah. But now you've got all these opportunities, all these different things. So your mind, you can never, well, a lot of people struggle to focus on one area, end up spreading themselves too thin. And not only that, what else eats into us is, I think, dating. So I think dating in today's is just messed up. It's messed up. Because my mum was talking to me, she was like, do you know what? I would hate to be in your generation and trying to date, just because everything is just so... do you know what? I don't even have a word for it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit higgy, man.
Empty.
It's a bit higgy, yeah.
Question for the guys. So do you think as a society, people accept men cheating more than they accept women cheating. Because I personally feel
100%.
men cheating is more acceptable in this society than women cheating.
100%.
That's how it is.
I just think
Because
women
see
will.
that Jada didn't even cheat technically, and look
Yeah,
how
they were
many
separated.
memes there were about how Will Smith is a mug, basically.
Yeah.
How does she
If it
not
was the
cheat?
other way round,
Plus, my
How
guy
did she
makes
not-
it
how
clear
did
that
she
he had
mean
his
about
fill. Like, he
Jada
had his
like
own
that?
time. He enjoyed himself.
Yeah. They both had their own
He
thing.
went to do his thing.
So why is he looking
Bro.
so heartbroken then? Like, come on, man.
He's looking. You know what it is, right?
You can't be looking at so sorrowful when
You know
what?
you know why I think he's disappointed. He's going literally. I'm going to be very crude here, so excuse me. I think he's gone. We were doing our thing. Keep your hose in check. Now you have me out here looking like some idiot about something that happened 4 years ago. Literally 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's not even.
Like
This is
something that happened so
none of
long.
my-
Like why
none
have
of
you
my
not kept
things
your
are
hose in
talking.
check? Because we
But
don't know
this-
about Will Smith's hose, and who Will Smith probably
Yeah, we do.
most
I got a problem.
likely
Come on.
was doing his thing.
I've got another question to add to Naima's question, and it's gonna get a bit personal. So, if you were cheated on, would you stay? Okay, if you were cheated on and no one was gonna find out about that, as in your boys won't know, you're not gonna tell them. Would it make a difference to you staying or not? As to whether, like, do you know what I mean? If they
That's the
know
way
or
I
not,
see it, right?
Why are you
I mean,
staying?
I'm not
Doesn't
going to
make
speak
it
for other
worse.
guys, but for me, if my partner cheats on me, I'm out. Like, you're not my partner anymore. It's not complicated.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's tough.
No,
but,
I
like,
agree.
how can you go back to that?
I can't help it.
I'm the same. I agree.
Oh boy.
I agree. But
If it was
I know
if
you're
it was
going to
a-
lead to. I know you're going to lead
I
to.
have
You're
a
going to say
question.
that women are. Hold on. You're going to say that women are expected to take men back. Blah blah. They're not, but they do.
Yeah.
Nah, you know what? To answer your
100%.
question, Serena, I think it's far more complex, man. Honestly speaking, like it's far more complex than we think because, in my opinion, like it depends on why they cheated in it. You know them ones where listen, hear me out.
Thank you.
No, before I actually even move on, I personally wouldn't stay because of the fact that I think it's an indication of a huge thing. Like, so people don't just cheat. Even as guys, we can say, oh, it's only the body. No, it's not only the body, bro. If you're going to be honest with yourself, there is some deep-seated issue somewhere why you can take somebody's reality and traumatize it that much and not care. Like, there must be something. So for me, I'll say it's why they cheated. So if it's, I'll be interested to know, like, where do we get to that you felt like the way to go about or solving the situation was to cheat? So you obviously don't love me anymore, or maybe, let's be real, maybe the quote unquote you don't feel satisfied in bed or whatever it is. So
are you saying it's a discussion thing? Like,
bro,
if that
I'm
happens,
bouncing, but I'd like to know why. I'm just curious. I'm bouncing.
Really? You want to know why?
Yeah, I want to know why. I want to know why.
But does
I want to know
knowing why make a difference?
Like, bro, if you're gonna distort my reality so much and take my idea of love and fuck it up that much, you're gonna have to explain, bro. I'm gonna sit you down. You're gonna tell me everything. Why you reckon that I deserve to go through this kind of trauma?
But what's it do for you?
Explain.
I agree.
I'll hold you accountable. You can't do that.
So much.
Yeah, like for me, but then that's what I'm saying. Like, if the thing is, if someone cheats on you and you just cut, and these times is because, bro, you are doing a madness, and these women are quote unquote, you know, using that to, I don't know, to. I think cheating is not just a surface level thing. I always believe there's something deep seated and it's manifested in a different way. So if somebody, let's say, is as on a superficial level, they're just sexually addicted, and that's an issue. That's a big issue, right? So
that's your problem for not noticing that.
Nah, man, you can't know that. It's not written on someone's forehead.
Bro, if she's
I'm a sexual
here,
addict. Like, you can't know that.
Yes, you can know that. What do you mean?
You can't
Unless you're
know
like dating with your eyes closed, you can know that. Do you know what I'm saying?
But you know, they say love is blind and all that. So you know,
man.
How would you know? But this is what you never know. Like, you actually never know. But I would do what Leon was saying. I would be quiet. There would be no emotion, but I'd want to know why.
Oh.
And you better be in love with the girl, because if you did it just for physical reasons, that's dumb. That is so silly.
Why are we assuming that it's the man that's done the cheating here?
No, I'm saying for me, in my reality, because I wouldn't cheat.
Yeah. Okay.
So, well, I would like to believe I would never cheat, but yeah.
The reason I asked that question is because I think a lot of guys let their mandem dictate how they conduct themselves and how they move through life, and especially when it comes to relationships.
Listen, nah.
They don't want to be moist.
Let me just clear this up. Let me clear this up. Yeah, okay. So this is what women think. Yeah, a lot of girls think that the mandem have a lot of say in what goes on. Yeah, but yeah, okay. You'll talk to your boys the same way that you'll talk to girls when things go wrong. But at the end of the day, you'll make your own decisions based on how you feel. You know what I mean? So they may hit a point.
Yeah,
huh? You're gonna have to go explain this to your boys, isn't it? Subconsciously there. Even me,
you know what,
if I was embarrassed by or violated by someone, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if I take this person back, I have to explain this to my friends. So surely it's even the same for you guys.
You know what I think? I think it's an age
because
thing.
Of toxic masculinity.
I think it's an age thing. Yeah, if you're between like I don't know, secondary school, sixth form, early parts of uni, that age group or whatever, then I can excuse it. But afterwards, come on, man. Like if the girl gives you a good vibe, you know that typical example of I've got a new girl, and then the boys are like, let's see what she looks like, right? That plays a role if we're gonna be honest. But like, you also have to ask yourself that, like, at what point do I just, if I, you know what I mean? If I like her, I like her. You know what I mean? It's for me, right? So I think there's an age thing there where maybe there's a cultural norm where between the certain age groups, like you do care to an extent that, like you want approval about how good your girl looks, or for example, whether you're treating her right. Because bro, like I remember in my friendship circle, I'll speak for myself. There were times where it's like, like CRB checks was a thing. You gotta like let people know like wagwan, like is this kosher? Like can I rock with this? Yeah, or whatever it is, right? So for me, no. If you're gonna be real, so but like God's grace, man has grown out of that. So you go, you know what? This is my life. So when it comes to the cheating thing, you just have to say to yourself, because all I'm saying is, right, hear me out. All I'm saying is, you could be with somebody that is the best for you for a lifetime, but they cheated on you. If you never know, it could be till you die. That doesn't mean that they're the worst person in the world.
God forbid. God forbid.
I can't lie, man. I just
someone that cheats on you could be the best person for you.
Nah,
that doesn't make any sense, bro.
Bro, you could be.
No, it doesn't.
You cannot have a negative and say the most positive thing. Actually, no. The most positive thing can come out of it, but really and truly, they're not the best person for you.
What you don't know is not your reality, is it?
Hey, you know what you're sounding like?
You're scaring me.
That song that's like, I don't want to know. That's what you like right now.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so scary. No, absolutely.
No, listen. I'm not advocating for no nonsense. I'm just saying the lives we live and the ideals we live, the lives we live on a day-to-day and the ideals we aspire to are very different. Let's be honest.
You sound like you could be a double agent.
Yeah. Any of us could be. That's the reality, though.
Nah,
I've got a quick question for the guys, just to bring us, I guess, a little bit back to topic. Like, which toxic masculine behaviors, right, in your personal journey, have you come to learn about, and then made you've grown from it? So you've gone, actually, that norm I used to think was cool, ain't cool, and for my own betterment and the betterment of the people around me, I'm gonna now take that step and say, I'm not practicing that anymore. Or which other positive ways of being masculine have you adopted? Because I always find that interesting.
For me, right, I can go and say that my views a lot come from Stoic philosophies, which is just basically the idea you focus on what you can control, and it's about accountability, right? So if something is outside of your control, right, you can't stress about that. If you're like, why are you spending time and energy on things that are outside of your realm? Do you know what I mean? Like worrying about other people, for example. I've not really had too much in terms of like struggling with emotions per se, because I've had my other outlets for that. So I don't think personally I've had a lot to deal with in terms of the realms of toxic masculinity.
What about you, Dre?
It would be like, so I used to be not very emotional at all, as in just very cold, very nonchalant about most things, and non-affectionate. So obviously, and these were just kind of things that I just grew up thinking that's the way it's supposed to be. Do you know what I mean? Don't show your emotion and don't be overly affectionate. But obviously, as I get older, growing up, I realised that's really not the way to go. So just like trying to make that change and adjust from that. I think that's probably my biggest thing.
Have you seen changes? Do you feel easier on yourself, or like what's the effect of that change that you adopted?
It's never easy. It's never easy to be like, if you're used to not showing emotion, how do you then go and open up and show emotion? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The affectionate thing, that's a little bit easier to work on. So I was like literally just being more physical. But if I'm used to just shutting things down, I like, it's not a thing where I suppress my feelings. It's just like it goes through one ear, it goes out the other, sort of type thing. I don't really think about it. So now I have to, do you know what I mean, take time to think about, how am I actually feeling? But no, how am I really feeling? And even still, it's still like hard to express that to other people and be like, I'd rather just keep it moving, which again is toxic because then that affects the other person. But baby steps.
I think personally, I used to be very, a little bit like Caleb was saying. Like, I used to think everything can be solved through thinking and just like piecing it apart, tackling it, and it's done. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that even when things get solved, there's an emotional residue that you have to deal with. And one thing I've learned is that just like we have different compartments of our body, just our being in entirety has different compartments. So I make sure I feed all aspects. So I know that there's a quote unquote spiritual aspect of me, there's a soul aspect of me, there's a body, there's a mind aspect of me, and not neglecting the non-physical stuff has been key for me. So now I'm able to actually, adopt a couple of things, little meditation here and there, or just little things where I feel like, you know what, like it's been prescribed, it works for a lot of people, I'll tap into that and see what comes out. And I'm a little bit more open to alternative ways of living rather than like we mentioned, some of the things that we were taught to grow up being. I just like open up a lot more, and it's been nice. It's just been nice to be emotionally available. It feels good. Literally, just feels hella sick sometimes, where you're just like, you know what, like just being able to speak on this or be open and just be easy. It just makes for a better living. So that's what's been really cool for me.
You know how Caleb spoke and Leon spoke about like positive outlets. This is now another little question. Do you think that certain outlets could be deemed feminine?
For example.
Huh?
Such as?
Well, like painting your nails and that.
Yeah, maybe.
Each to their own.
What? So if you could get like what? Just I don't know. What would be feminine?
For example, if a man goes, I'm feeling really stressed out, life is so shit, let me go to the gym and work it out, versus a man saying, I'm feeling really stressed out, life is so shit, let me write my diary.
Oh, okay.
Is there a difference? Or
I don't think writing a diary is feminine. I don't think writing a diary is feminine. And I thought, do you know what? I thought you were going to say a spa, and I was going to say, I don't think a spa is
that's what I thought you were going to say.
I don't think a spa would be deemed feminine, wouldn't it?
First time I went to a spa, and I was like, this is actually mad nice. Like,
it's not like that. Oh, mate. Yeah.
I think guys miss out on a lot because of society.
No, I just don't think we just don't have access. We don't think of going to do that. Like the same way you probably wouldn't think of going to kick ball, do you know what I mean? Or whatever. It's the same for us. We just don't think to go to the spa. But until you go with like one of your girls or whatever, then you're not going to experience that. And it's not until I went, and then I was like, whoa, this is nice. I went with Naima, and I was like, this is really nice. I could do this again.
I think one thing that is really key in like what you just explained is that as when we're growing up as men, just being able to have friends that are girls, or if you have a girlfriend or whatever, and listening to that whole aspect of living where you've not been accustomed to, and being open to like getting on that journey, I think has been really key, because you get to know about like so much other methods of doing stuff. Whereas like for example, man, like I had a bath the other day, and I was with candles and shit, and I was like, wow, that's why they're always happy. Doing this all the time, like you're always gonna be happy. Well,
the way you phrased that, I was like,
yeah.
Is this your first bath this year?
Until you said the candles, I was like, oh,
yeah. Okay, I see where he's going with it.
Accent man don't have a shower.
But you're right. The whole candles thing is a vibe.
Honestly,
I tried it.
Like, we have like friends and like that have, and I think it's just cool because you realize that obviously, like I believe that even as men or whatever, we do have feminine aspects of us. Like I believe that the makeup of a guy is not just strictly like what you call, masculine or whatever. So, tapping into the aspects of your femininity, I guess, can be useful.
I'm actually struggling to think of many feminine outlets, like other than painting your nails and stuff like that, doing your makeup.
What would you guys recommend that is good for human beings to do, that it tends to be feminine, like, as women? What would you recommend? Like, what do you think? What practices do you reckon, or you've advised some of your male friends to do? And
I feel like just pampering yourself. Like I feel like the act of pampering yourself.
Self-care.
See, this is it. The difference between masculine and feminine energy. Feminine is more inward, and whereas masculine is more physical and outward. So the idea of going to the gym or kicking ball, it doesn't mean that you have to be male to do masculine things or have to be female to do those things. But it's like the spectrums of the energy.
Yeah.
But a man's pampering himself would be getting a trim, cutting your nails, combing your beard, whatever. Do you know what I mean? That's pampered.
Dre, you missed the beginning of the conversation, but what do you think about like crying, or do you feel like that's something you can do? Do you know what I mean? Like,
okay.
You missed
so
that.
Here's the thing with crying. Yeah, I think a lot of people say, "Oh, men can't cry. Men shouldn't cry," and then they associate that with everything. So, but really, if you look at it, when kids are crying, when boys are crying, they're crying because they've been hurt or like something. Do you know what I mean? It's usually something physical, and you're like, stop your noise, stop crying, sort of thing, man up. And then that gets associated with that being emotional and not being able to show emotions when someone makes you feel a certain way. But I think they're two completely isolated things. Like I can't personally remember many. I can remember a few, but I can't remember many cases of boys crying when I was at school because someone didn't like them. Do you know what I mean? Or someone said something horrible to them. It's just like, okay, cool, whatever. They only cry because they've been physically hurt. And they're like, stop crying, suck it up, sort of thing. And I think it's completely separate. So like the whole, men don't cry now, that's because they're not getting physically hurt. And I don't think they would have cried to do with something emotional anyway in the first place.
Interesting.
I think they did cry for emotional stuff, but it's from a very young age they cut it out. So, for example, once again, I used my brother for example. If he thought he was being treated unfairly as like 5 or 6 or 3, he would cry. 3-year-olds, guys, boys cry.
Yeah.
If they don't get their toys or whatever, and then they're told from young, stop.
I'm thinking, yeah.
I cried a lot as a kid, and I think that's why I don't cry anymore. Bro.
I'm thinking like once you've reached school. I'm thinking once you've reached primary school, and then going into that transition to secondary school. I can't remember anyone ever crying at secondary school, to be honest. But go on.
I don't know if it's just my household, because I've tried to make sure that I've cultivated a community.
A crying space. Cut it out.
I don't want my little brothers being toxic. Even things like me and my mum were talking about it the other day, and we were saying that she never really said I love you to me and my sister. Not because she doesn't, like her way of showing love is very much like acts of service. Like that's actually her love language, and we were discussing this. And she'll just do you feel her love by the way that she does things for you. But I was saying how like when my little brothers came along, they're like 10 and 12 years younger than me. I love you is very normal now in the household, because I wanted to make sure that they felt like they could say it, especially because I know anyway this expectation of men not being emotional. And I don't know if that's because of me why they're like this, but as I will cry if he loses a game on Fortnite or something like that. Malachi will cry if he feels like he's being treated differently by my mum. Like they will cry not because they're being physically hurt, but they will cry because of emotions, and they will get angry. And at the moment, Malachi's 11, so he's going through like this hormonal stage. So we thought he was moving mad, because Malachi's always been a calm, like soft soul. And like one of the things I've always loved about him is like Aziel is turned into the Tasmanian devil, and Malachi has always been so calm. And then recently he's just been moving so mad, and we were like, my mom was like, it's hormones, like just let him
come in a man.
Like he'll get angry and then he'll start crying. Like he'll be angry at something but start crying, and it's just like my
Do you know why a lot of guys do that? There's a lot of guys that will do that, and that's because they're not allowed to express themselves physically. Because if they act in physical ways at all, they're told you can't behave like this, like you need to calm down. They're not actually allowed to have that physical expression these days.
Physical ways like what? Like punching a wall?
Yeah,
maybe sports. Maybe sports.
Even that.
You got to have a little brother or something that you can punch up, man. It's essential.
That's true. But this is the big thing, right? Okay, this is why we got so many bad youths running about, because no one's allowed to discipline them, and they've never been given that discipline before.
It's very essential, like, because me growing up, I used to get beaten up by my cousins. My brother.
If you've got older siblings, if you step out of line, you are getting a punch.
Yeah.
And even if it's not them going full force, like they're gonna make sure that you feel it, so that you know that if you step out of line, like this is what's coming. And I think that's what.
Yeah, but that can build up some pent up. Like,
violence.
The thing is, we all receive it differently,
it can
right?
go both ways, but it's necessary.
We all receive it differently, don't we? So some people may receive it as, I know my boundaries, I know the territories I can't mess about with, and some people go, watch. Literally, some people just put in their head and say, watch.
You see them bad man youths right there, They didn't get enough licks. They didn't get enough licks as a child.
No. I'm saying some people turn it up, like genuinely, like say, okay, cool. And I remember typical thing, because I grew up in Ghana a little bit before I came to this country. It was a thing where people go and play football, come home, and then they'll get licked. Bro, man did the calculation in his head as soon as he got to 13.
You say man would just go play football, come home, and just get licked. So
yeah, because like you're not supposed to go to play football. You're supposed to.
Oh right, I thought you meant just right.
No. So you go. So you come back and go. They're making in their head that okay, cool. I really want to play football. So they make the calculation. I'll take the licks. And then it gets to a point, one time mum is about to hit you, and you just hold the cane, and you look in her eye, and she realizes that, wait, it's fun. That's what I'm saying. People can receive it differently. Whereas this is a clear conversation. Whereas this is a clear conversation and say, sit down.
Discipline.
This is why I don't want you to go out. And then you go, okay, why don't you want me to go out? And then like an actual like breakdown, and your intellect is respected, and your emotional status is understood, that I really want to play football, and said this is the routine. But then if you say I'm gonna hit you, and they go, okay, cool, I'll store that, and then there's gonna come a time I'll enjoy it, and then when I get immune to it, then you've lost your control as either a brother or a parent-child
relationship.
Yeah, parent-child, brother or cousin, something like that. It's
the
very
thing
different.
Is, in the real world, when they go out there, if they carry on and act the same way, it might be someone who's a lot bigger than them that will thump them up and might kill them.
Caleb and Dre,
I'm not joking.
It's so true.
Listen, I tell my brother, you've got so many of these boys getting stabbed out here.
Listen, I tell this to my younger brother. I tell this to him all the time, because he's got like a slight attitude, not massive, but it's just like, if you do that to the wrong person,
exactly,
in public, it's gonna be peak. Like, and I always tell him, and it's just like, I had to, obviously, as we were growing up, I kept him in check, blah blah, whatever. My older cousin kept him in check. But it's little things, and it even did happen. Like one time, he was showing this older man, like a big grown man attitude, because he threw a snowball at his kid, and the man wanted to now fight my brother, who's like 17, and my brother's giving an attitude, like puffing out his chest. And I'm like, bro, you need to learn respect. Do you know what I mean? And you need to learn the time and the situations, and you're not going to get that if you don't have older people in your life who are going to keep you in check.
But that's what I'm saying. You speak to them. You speak to them. But if you go with that,
no, I can speak to him now. But when he was younger, he did get roughed up. Do you know what I mean? The same way I got roughed up, so I didn't turn into a bad youth. In the same way, my older cousins got roughed up.
Do you think that's right? They never get roughed up.
It's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
Hundreds.
Answer me,
because I do agree that people need to be taught respect, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, Caleb started off by saying sometimes men get so angry they want to cry, and that's because they can't be physical. The only issue with that is if your outlet hurts another person, that's an issue. If you cry in your room,
doesn't have
fine.
to hurt someone else.
Go to
It
the
could
gym,
literally
fine.
be.
But if your outlet now is beating up your cousin, your little brother,
That's
Not beating, not beating them, not beating them up.
Condoning violence.
Not
Beating them up
stage.
doesn't have to be violence. It could literally be, right, I'm going for a walk. It could be,
sport.
I'm going to go throw punches at a punch bag.
I don't believe that stopped. I don't believe that is stopped. I believe, when you're saying that men aren't allowed to be physical, I don't know.
Look at a classroom. So my mum's a teacher, right?
Okay.
And she's taught in girls' schools and she's taught in boys' schools. And I actually spent the first 7 years of my life in an all-boys school and then went to a mixed school. So I firsthand seen the difference, right? And so from personal experience, in an all-boys school, right, if boys have an issue, it will start verbal, but it will get sorted quick.
Very quick.
There'll be a quick verbal exchange and it will be done. And if that doesn't solve it, it will get physical.
Scrap.
And do you know what? The teachers allow a quick 5-minute thing because once that's done, it's dealt with. It's done. Finished. And they're friends the next day. Whereas my mum then, so I've been comparing notes with my mum because she's taught in both an all-boys school and an all-girls school. And she says the same thing, whereas that's what happens in a boys' school. Whereas girls, it's all it's catty and emotional.
That'll pass down for years and years and years, innit?
It continues, into a dragged out drama.
So, more conversations
will be had.
Conversations breed more understanding overall anyway. And I think if everybody makes an effort to understand people who aren't like themselves, and as you guys know, I always talk about empathy, then maybe the world would be a better place overall. Obviously, I feel like just the topic of toxic masculinity and that intertwined with mental health is such a broad subject. With so many different viewpoints and opinions. I don't even think we even really touched on the whole men being 75 of suicide in the UK, men making up 75% of that, which is pretty crazy. And why? But I feel
they will definitely have to go into that one next time because I was talking to my boys about that recently. But I'm not going to say anything because I'll open a can of worms.
Yeah, I was going to say that should definitely be a conversation for next time. But until then, maybe we can get people who listen to this episode to share their opinions on toxic masculinity and mental health. And I think we'll definitely do another part 2, just discussing all of this because this was really interesting, everyone's different viewpoints. And it was also good to get male perspective because we are all women at Untold. So it was nice to get male perspectives. But
there was one thing I would like to say before we go, and I didn't get a chance to say it, but I think these conversations are so important. I think there are toxic masculinity and things that females generally do that are toxic to ourselves. I think what gives us the freedom to talk about it helps us find the middle, like a balance that we can all work on. And sometimes women don't have to always go to the spa; they can go to a gym instead. And I think this is I think it's a great conversation to have, so we can all learn about finding the middle ground. Because I think this is new territory for all of us. Like our parents had, and our grandparents and all of those had set roles. And for us, we don't have the set roles anymore. So actually we get to pick what we want to do. And I think having the conversation really opens us up to picking what's right for both of us as male and females. So we can really find a good, healthy way of living as humans. So yeah.
For sure.
All right, guys, I'm gonna have to.
Man, it's been real, man. It's been real.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us and for your knowledge.
Thank you for having us. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thank you guys for listening. At times, I think it was a bit hectic having 7 different voices trying to share their opinions. But I think it's really good. And first and foremost, what we want to do is just encourage conversations and different opinions and point of views. So if you guys do have anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, I really hope that you converse with us through our socials and #ThisIsUntold.